Hashtag the history of Saturday Night Live. Hashtag Hook. For nearly 50 years, one television show has launched more careers, created more cultural moments, and survived more near cancellations than any other program in broadcast history. Saturday Night Live has aired over 900 episodes, produced more than 160 cast members, and generated billions of dollars in cultural influence. And the wildest part? It was almost cancelled after its very first season by the same network that created it. Hashtag tease. In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover exactly how a broke, chaotic, cocaine-fueled experiment in late-night television became the most important comedy institution in American history. You will learn about the secret rivalries that nearly destroyed it, the cast members who were fired and came back bigger than ever, and the one controversial decision made in 1975 that network executives hated but accidentally created the blueprint for every edgy comedy show that came after it. The answer might genuinely change how you watch the show forever. Hashtag background. To understand Saturday Night Live, you have to go back to 1975. Television was safe, predictable, and thoroughly controlled by network executives who believed audiences wanted comfortable entertainment. Johnny Carson owned late night. Variety shows were polished, rehearsed, and sanitized. There was no room for risk. Then NBC hired a 29-year-old Canadian producer named Lorne Michaels, and everything changed. Michaels pitched the network on something radical: a live comedy show, produced in New York, written and performed by young unknowns, airing at 11:30 on Saturday nights. The time slot was essentially dead air. NBC used it to rerun Johnny Carson episodes. Nobody cared what happened there, which meant nobody would stop Michaels from doing exactly what he wanted. The original cast, called the Not Ready for Primetime Players, included Chevy Chase, John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, Gilda Radner, Jane Curtin, Lorraine Newman, and Garrett Morris. These were not polished television performers. They were counterculture comedians, improvisers, and writers who had spent years doing experimental comedy in clubs and theaters. They brought an energy to television that had never existed before: raw, unpredictable, and genuinely dangerous. The first episode aired on October 11, 1975, hosted by George Carlin. The ratings were modest. The reviews were confused. NBC executives were nervous. But something strange happened over the following weeks. Word spread. College students started staying home on Saturday nights. The show developed a cult following almost entirely through word of mouth, which in 1975 meant actual human beings talking to each other. Hashtag main content. By season 2, Saturday Night Live was a phenomenon. Chevy Chase became the first breakout star, his Weekend Update delivering deadpan news satire that felt unlike anything on television. But Chase left after just one season to pursue film, and that departure created the first real crisis for the show. Could it survive without its biggest star? It could. And that resilience became the defining characteristic of SNL throughout its history. The late 70s represented the show at its absolute creative peak. John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd developed the Blues Brothers, a musical comedy act that started as a sketch and became a genuine cultural movement. Gilda Radner created characters like Rosanna Donna and Emily Litella that became beloved beyond the show itself. The writing was sharp, political, and occasionally so controversial that NBC censors would physically stop tape rehearsals. But here is what nobody talks about: behind the scenes, the first era of SNL was held together almost entirely by chaos. Cast members routinely showed up high. Writers pulled all-nighters fueled by substances that would end careers today. The production was technically a disaster week after week. And yet somehow, that chaos fed the energy. The show felt alive because it genuinely was on the edge of falling apart every single Saturday night. Then came 1980, and the entire world collapsed. Lorne Michaels left. Most of the original cast left with him. NBC handed the show to a new producer, Gene Dumanian, who assembled an almost entirely unknown cast. The 1980 season is widely considered the worst in SNL history. Ratings collapsed. Critics called for cancellation. An NBC executive later admitted they kept the show alive purely because they had no idea what else to put in the time slot. Dick Ebersol took over in 1981 and brought in Eddie Murphy, who single-handedly saved the franchise. Murphy was 20 years old, electrifying, and funnier than almost anyone who had ever stood on that stage. His characters, Buckwheat, Mr. Robinson, Velvet Jones, became cultural touchstones. Murphy's run proved that SNL could regenerate, that the show was bigger than any individual cast. Lorne Michaels returned in 1985, and what followed was another decade of reinvention. The late 80s brought Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, Jan Hooks, and Mike Myers. The Church Lady, Wayne's World, Hans and Franz. These were not edgy counterculture sketches anymore, they were mainstream American comedy, watched by 30 million people every week. SNL had transformed from a cult experiment into an institution. But here is the data point that surprises most people. Even at its most popular, in the early 90s, SNL was still considered by Hollywood insiders to be creatively compromised. The pressure to produce audience-friendly material had smoothed away the dangerous edges that made the original show revolutionary. Critics argued it had become exactly what it was designed to disrupt. Then 1990 happened. Adam Sandler, Chris Rock, Chris Farley, David Spade, Mike Myers, and Rob Schneider all appeared on the same cast list simultaneously. This has never happened before or since in television history, that many future major film stars sharing one stage at one time. And the show still nearly got cancelled again, because the network thought the cast was too young and too weird. The 90s cast went on to generate over $15 billion in box office revenue collectively. NBC's doubt was, in retrospect, spectacularly wrong. Hashtag deep dive. What most casual viewers do not understand is that SNL operates on a production model that should be completely unsustainable. Every single week, an entirely new show is written, rehearsed, and performed live with almost no safety net. The writing process begins Monday morning. Table reads happen Wednesday. Sketches are cut Thursday. Dress rehearsal happens Saturday afternoon. The live show airs Saturday night. By Sunday morning, the entire production is dismantled and the process starts again. This is insane by any professional television standard. Most scripted shows spend months producing a single episode. SNL produces 40 episodes a season, every single year, for nearly 5 decades. The genius of this model is also its cruelty. The pressure is relentless. Cast members who cannot perform under that pressure wash out quickly. Those who thrive become some of the most versatile performers in entertainment history. Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, Will Ferrell, Bill Hader, Kristen Wiig, they were all refined by the same brutal weekly process. And then there is the political dimension. SNL has shaped American elections more than most people realize. Chevy Chase's stumbling Gerald Ford impression contributed to public perception of a sitting president. Tina Fey's Sarah Palin impression in 2008, "I can see Russia from my house," was quoted in actual news coverage as if it were a real statement. Studies conducted after the 2008 election found that a measurable percentage of voters could not correctly identify whether specific quotes came from Palin or Fey. That is extraordinary cultural power. Hashtag analysis. The deeper you look at SNL's history, the more you realize it functions less like a television show and more like a living organism that constantly sheds old cells and grows new ones. Every generation of viewers believes their era's cast was the best. Every generation of critics declares the show is finally, definitely over. And every time, it comes back. What explains this? The answer is structural. SNL does not depend on specific talent, it manufactures talent. The combination of live performance pressure, collaborative writing, and national exposure creates performers in a way that no other institution can replicate. It is simultaneously a comedy boot camp, a cultural barometer, and a talent incubator. The show's willingness to engage with political and social controversy has also kept it culturally relevant in ways purely entertainment-focused shows cannot achieve.